But she made the right step there.
Right.
I appreciate that.
I have a brother, Mark. Pretty original
Nat
name.
Mark. Yes, very original.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Everybody here is okay online. Meeting has not started yet, but we're just making sure the sound's working.
I'm gonna give you some more paper.
Okay.
We're gonna mute ourselves
Shorted chair.
until the meeting starts.
Oh, shit. So, want to try to stay on time today. I will be cutting out at about 10:45. I got another appointment I got to get to in Castleton. So, if we're not done, Matt will kind of take over for me. Appreciate everybody coming. It's a beautiful day out. So, I love this time of year. And I appreciate, go ahead and open up the meeting and call it to order. First, I'd like to just get out of the way of the roll call.
Steve Jones,
Here.
Matt Wells,
Here.
Stephanie McKinney. Here. Matt Bilkey. Matt Bilkey. Courtney,
Here.
Sean French,
Present.
Bruce Palin,
Here.
Aaron Sims.
Here.
Travis Tuchain. Travis Tuchain. Myra McShane. Myra McShane. Ian Angerman.
Here.
Amy DeRoche Matthews.
Here.
All right, thank you. We've got some new members on the board today, which I'm kind of really excited because I've been waiting forever to get some of the people to the table and get some of our vacancies filled. So I would like, again, we do this fairly often because we get some people that are new to the commission and kind of all of us just introduce ourselves, a little bit about yourselves, the background and why you're here, why you have an interest. But I'm Steve Jones, of course, the chairman of the board. I'm the Indiana State Fire Marshal, been doing it for about 3.5 years. Before that, I've got about 43 years on the fire department, riding back step, started out as a regular firefighter. I got a pretty decent history of hazardous materials response during my career. 2 girls and 3 grandkids. So that's who I am. You want to go ahead?
Bruce Palin. I'm retired from the Department of Environmental Management. I worked there I was actually worked for the state for 40 years. And at the time I retired, I was representing the commissioner on this board as a proxy. And when I retired, they asked me to come back and join as a member of the public. So I've got a long history, I guess, with this particular group stretching back to my days at IDEM. I have 2 sons, twin boys, and 2 grandkids.
Good morning, Sean French, Eli Lilly. I serve as an emergency officer on our Indianapolis emergency response team. And then I serve as a co-chief of staff on our corporate crisis management team. I've served with the commission, probably for about 10, 12 years.
Hi, I'm Amy DeRocher Matthews. I'm the emergency manager for Eli Lilly and Company, Indianapolis. I also have responsibility for other sites in the US. And I've been in my role for probably about 11 years and with Lilly for 27 years. And I have 2 girls.
Hi, Stephanie McKinney, Gibson County EMA Director and part of LAPC, and probably that's about it.
Oh, okay, I guess Lauren Francis, Indiana Department of Homeland Security. Take care of Has Connect program.
My name's Leanne Angerman. I'm just a public appointment to this board by the governor. In my day job, which is not connected, I work for U.S. Senator Banks. I'm one of his regional directors. But my background's from dispatch. I dispatched for 10 years for 911. Spent time in probation, parole, all sorts of things that make up who I am.
Good morning. My name is Bob Courtney. I'm Mayor of City of Madison, second term. We deal with public safety and emergency situations all the time, and even our little community on the Ohio River, Madison, Indiana, has not been immune to it. So I'm very interested in just continuing to learn and improve public safety and emergency management in our community. I work very closely with our county EMA director.
Similar to the mayor said, I'm a mayor, first term in Monticello. Name's Aaron Sims. I've got 3 beautiful boys and a little daughter that's 2. My background is in the hospitality business. We own a restaurant. I think we're celebrating our 20th year, which is tells you a little bit how shallow I'm upstairs. We should have been out of that business a long time ago, but it's in your blood. It is. But for our little community, we've got a couple rivers. Those are lakes, Lake Shaper, Lake Freeman, and amusement park. And we've seen all the green energies and the new technology come in our community, and just want to make sure I'm learning everything I can about to protect our community.
Morning, I'm Matt Wells. I work for Department of Homeland Security, assigned to the State Fire Marshal's Office. We're hazmat. I'm also one of the investigators. And I'm the Director Jonathan Whittam of Homeland Security. I'm his proxy for the board.
And then our last arrival. We're introducing ourselves, so we're going to start over. No. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Myra McShane. I work for the Indiana Department of Environmental Management. I am the section chief for the emergency response section for IDEM.
Okay. Appreciate everybody. I mean, you just sit here and listen to the different experience in this room. And it is pretty decent to bring everybody together. And I know she said that she's just a public representative, but that's who we're protecting, right? We wouldn't be here if that wasn't our job. And I think the public needs to have a say, to be exposed to the work that we're doing, and very much appreciate you and all the experience that everybody's bringing to the table. So report of the chair, next on the agenda, I put together, I think, well, you could pass that on down to her that just came in.
Do you have another one of those? I didn't get one in.
Yeah. You didn't want to, did you? But anyway, I put together, these are just some, you can't capture all because nobody reports to us, unfortunately, whenever they have a spill, but spills happen all the time, or accidents happen all the time in Indiana that have grave potential to be like really bad, and one of the incidents here is right next to a hospital. When you got, I don't know how many people are in like IU hospital, hundreds and hundreds of patients. And if you have to evacuate a hospital, it's crazy. It's manpower intensive, equipment intensive, and it takes forever. So just a part that what we're trying to do, the reason this commission exists is to help the emergency responders and emergency planning. So if an incident happens, that we can keep it small. But anyway, there's 6 different things that I've listed. In Munster, they had an abandoned pipeline. We have abandoned pipelines everywhere across the country, and they always have a potential of leaking what product was in there. And anyway, there was a sheen. And, it caused an odor, and from time to time, things happen. And the first thing anybody knows of a leak is because they have an odor somewhere, and they send one engine out there to investigate where the odor is coming from. And they find out they have a large hazmat incident. It's not around a residential neighborhood that they show up, and it's kind of a big deal, So the other one was a natural gas main rupture in Arcadia. They evacuated people in a 1/4-mile radius. Partially, it was lifted the same evening. But again, pipelines are in the ground. They're the safest way to transport petroleum and a lot of different products. But from time to time, contractors get into those and create large problems. Incident 3 was a sewage overflow into a retention pond up in Carmel. And, who knows what's in those sewage drains that come up anyway. It can create a humongous environmental problem with large fish kills, animal kills. And then on top of that, besides the product, you have a large stink of a lot of vegetation, a lot of animals that are killed. Looks like a drunk driver caused that because he wrecked into a piece of equipment. Number 4, hydrochloric acid release in Jeffersonville, which is pretty close to Madison, down on the Ohio. We took a hazmat response. There was no danger to the public or evacuation order given. But in industry, it happens quite often to have a spill on the facility. And it was in a proximity of a hospital with a vapor hazard potential. Let's see here.
Have you heard of that? Jeez. Yeah, interesting. I know.
All this happens, nobody,
Yeah.
Yeah.
sometimes I didn't, but most time, no, they don't want to call. They really don't. Chemicals, let's see. Next one's down in Jeffersonville again. It looks like, let's see, a spill on the Loop Road at Ports of Indiana Industrial Corridor. And it was mechanical failure during industrial operations. And one of the things that comes out from that, and I think, I'm sure the Department of Highway does this, but they have several accidents and they've had multiple hazardous material accidents in that same location, and I guess it just, to me, it emphasizes pre-planning on our hazardous materials teams to know where the storm drains are ahead of time. There's plenty of programs out there to map where storm drains are and where they're going and those types of things. But any place where you have large volume of chemicals, our hazmat teams really, part of their pre-planning is where's it going to go if it gets off the facility, and where are we going to make the stop? Whenever I was back in the day, I would pre-plan, if a facility had a spill that got off site, where are we going to catch it at? That way it doesn't continue to go downstream and get into Eagle Creek Reservoir or Eagle Creek that goes into the White River. Anyway, it's just stress the importance of that. And then illegal dumping. I don't think they ever found out who dumped it. It was some sort of petroleum agent. Thank you. Waterway contamination adjacent to hospitals and just, illegal dumping is a big deal, but a lot of people don't think about the damage that it does. All they know is if they have to dispose of it, it's going to cost them a lot of money. And if they can pull up somewhere and dump it, it's free, and it really hurts the environment, hurts people when somebody's just got a hazardous materials they need to get rid of, and it's going to cost them 20, 30, $250,000. And if they find a place to dump it, it can create quite the problem. So that is my report. Anybody have any comments on that?
What's the reporting requirement? And is there any, oversight on that from the local planning committees?
Yeah, I think I probably could have educated us.
So reporting requirements for tier 2, there's a specific amount, quantities depending on the contamination or depending on the chemical. For Indiana based on the spill rule, it depends on your petroleum, if it's a petroleum product, if it is on or off property, so on or off facility. So if it's within the facility, there's a certain requirement. They can spill more within their facility as long as it stays on their facility, and of course they clean it up. If it's off their facility, it's a lesser quantity depending on the chemical as well. So petroleum, different types of chemicals, things that are listed on the list of lists from EPA. And then that, according to the spill rule, we have sort of a catch-all for objectionable substances. So things that are not necessarily on the EPA list of lists, not chemicals, but things that could cause I don't know, nuisance sort of thing, like milk. Spilled milk is not really, what do you call it, but it is a nuisance. It could have potential to harm as well. So,
Does the reporting come from the person that caused the incident or the response, the emergency response?
both.
Both?
The responsibility is actually on the spiller. So the responsible party should be the one to call in. But sometimes, a lot of times it doesn't happen that way. Our first responders, those boots on the ground, fire departments, police officers, those are our county EMAs. They usually call the spill line to let us know.
Thanks.
Steve, may I make some additions? Yeah. So I'm Jeff Lorimore. I served on this, I'm privileged of serving on this group until January when I retired from the health department, and I'm still a member of the Rankin County PC. So what Myra talked about was the Indiana spill and spill reporting. LEPCs are governed by a different set of reporting requirements. So after the Emergency Planning Community Right to Know Act, established in the list of lists that Myra explained, there are reporting quantities, threshold planning quantities. So a subset of what Myra kind of talked about is what LEPCs get notified of. And so in that, it's not ambiguous. It is very clear. Facilities are required to report. And while it's not really stated expressly, basically it's within 10 to 15 minutes of recognition that you've had a release. There is the National Response Center. So there's kind of a hierarchy of reporting. So spills typically of a hazardous materials nature go to the NRC, the LEPC, and the CERT, which in Indiana's case goes back to IDA. It goes to the watch desk, and then the watch desk sends it over to the IDA spill service. So any report that Steve was talking about was something that would have been reported through either probably the IRC, should have gone to the LEPC, and also went to that. And so there are reportable quantities. So like anti-testimony, for instance, if you've got a cold storage in your area of jurisdiction, I think it's 10 pounds. It's a very small amount.
Yeah.
But if a facility releases more than the reportable quantity of anhydrous ammonia and has to go off site for the LEPCs, then it is reportable. And that, so LEPCs, each LEPC should have designated a community emergency coordinator. And so that community emergency coordinator is the one who receives that notification. And then they document that the release occurred. There are several questions that the LEPC asks the reportable reporter. And then that report is followed up in 10 days with a written report. And it's also now with HazConnect, we report it also with the HazConnect system. So that LEPCs have an electronic storage report release.
Yeah, I think too, yeah, reporting is okay, but the intent is to get people to clean it up. You know, and I was blessed to have Marion County Health Department. When I worked here in Marion County, fire department can mark in service and leave, and the health department made for sure that it was cleaned up, you know.
It's being developed because of global India. And so facilities that have, some facilities like Eli Lilly that have their own fire department. And they're able to deal with a lot of their incidents that are on their site. Part of what EPRA was created for was facilities that have releases that go off site, but still feel like they don't need help in dealing with it. I mean, they can control it, but once it goes off site, they're not calling 911. They're not making public safety resources aware of what's going on. So that notification requirement is to make someone aware that there's been an incident, like what happened in Bhopal, India. Union Carbide had it covered. They didn't think they needed any help, but they failed to notify. So by notifying us, I mean, we had a facility in Indianapolis on the west side that had incident releases with some regularity, and they would notify us. But in most of those cases, they did not need fire department response. They did not need EMS. They just had a little burp and they lost over the reportable quantity of anhydrous ammonia and they notified us. And, you know, again, there was no expectation of a response, but that notification is critical to making us aware that there was a release. So it puts us, like what Steve said, it gives us kind of a heads up, gives us an edge. If it does escalate into something greater, we're already hopefully ahead of the game instead of finding out much later.
All right.
We have a question for you in the chat. Who would the LEPC report to for the community response navigator? That's the question. Sandra, can you elaborate?
Oh, the community emergency coordinator. So that is the person who is designated to receive the notifications for the LEPC. So like in Marion County, the community emergency coordinator is the Marion County Health Department's on-call hazmat person. So when a facility calls the Marion County LEPC spill line, right now that goes to a call center, and that call center then notifies our on-call hazmat person. The on-call hazmat person is the community emergency coordinator. It should be spelled out in that individual's county's hazmat plan, who the CEC is, and how that CEC flow of information happens. In some counties, it could be the EMA director. In some counties, it could be a fire department. I'm not really sure. I know how it is in our county, but the plan should state who the CEC is.
All right, next on the agenda, number 5. Now let's see here. Wait a minute, did we do review in action of February meeting minutes? All right, I'm getting ahead of myself. Number 4 on the agenda is review in action of the February 9th, 2026 meeting minutes. Has everybody reviewed any questions on that before we approve the minutes of February 9th? If not, have a roll call to approve.
You can just do a first and a second because there's no IRC members online.
Okay.
I'll make a motion.
Got one motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Got a second. Boom, we're done there. Review and action of the LAPC roster appointments and removals. Yeah, it's this list got every county. So we're required to approve these rosters for all the LAPCs in all 92 counties. So everybody read and memorized those.
I know them all personally.
May have to abstain.
So let's go ahead and, do I have a motion to accept?
I'll move to approve the roster changes.
I'll second. Sean French.
Okay. I'll accept the LAPC roster appointments and removals.
Marshall. This is Sean Wooden, General Counsel, IDHS. You still need to do a voice vote even after the motions. So you just need to do all those in favor, all those opposed.
I didn't realize you were online. So.
All right. Okay, Sean, so go back to the February meeting minutes and do the roll call again.
Yeah, let's do the meeting minutes.
Okay. Steve Jones,
Aye.
Matt Wells,
Yes.
Stephanie McKinney,
Yes.
Matt Bilkey.
Lauren,
Matt Bilkey.
you don't need to,
Yep.
you don't need to
You
do the
didn't
roll
do all
call. You
of
just
them.
need to say all those in favor since everybody's not
Got it.
online.
Okay, thanks, Sean. All in favor?
Aye.
And then all opposed.
All opposed? Okay, then we'll move to the LEPC roster appointments and removals. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, Sean.
All righty. Fiscal report.
Yes, you should have a copy of this page right here. The fiscal report for the IRC for fiscal year 26 from July 1 of 25 to April 30th of this year. Thank you, Ohio. The appropriation was $125,992.30. And so far, we have obligated $111,687.16. Most of it is for staffing, which is Lauren. And then the other larger amount is our annual amount we pay Has Connect, the program that we use for the reporting system. And that is $54,590, which is annual cost for Has Connect. Questions on that?
Is this just for that time period that we're looking at? here?
Yes, yes, through April 30th. Yeah.
Thank you.
And then, ready for the next one. So we're due to renew Has Connect again, at least the annual service agreement for Has Connect. Yeah, so it's $54,900 or it's $54,590. So if you're looking at the page, it's copies in your packet, Amendment 3, that's the contract language. And then the very last page is the actual cost for this. We actually had to start this earlier than this meeting. The process to get these contracts or service agreements renewed is a lengthy process now with some changes in the way the contracts are reviewed and approved. So again, we started the process. I believe the commission has to vote on that, but the process has been started. It's been delayed a little bit now because of contract language change in the government. So they're making some language changes in the current agreement. So that'll be worked through pending approval today. So again, the cost hasn't changed. It's $54,590 for that.
This is not an additional amount. This is basically, it's just the annual amount.
Annual cost.
Okay.
It's an amendment to the contract, I believe, every year. And service agreement. And Lauren tries to get the money's worth out of them as much as we can. Issues we're having with the program.
Yeah, anything that we ask of them, they just don't want to do it unless they charge $15,000-$20,000 every time we ask them to fix or modify.
Yeah.
And so, I think long-term, Has Connect, they're kind of the thing right now, but, I would want to look at other options at some point, rather than Has Connect. There's so much in technology today. It's just real cumbersome for an emergency responder to get that information. I would love for the information to feed CAD systems. So rather than them having to look it up with a password and username, our fire, there's too much that goes on in the fire service to worry about passwords and stuff and trying to get things, most fire engines in the volunteer world, they don't carry a computer, but every dispatch center in Indiana does. And I would want to look at something long-term, to get the technology to where our system feeds the CAD systems. So if they have chemicals, at least the dispatchers could put their eyes on it, and get that to the emergency responders. But that's a big project just in itself, and it would probably cost more than $50,000.
We have issues on the back end as far as like the business side, if you will, as far as receiving payments, different type of payments. Lauren had to manually go through and do a lot of what do you call it, invoicing or late fees and tracking stuff manually instead of the system doing it on its own. We asked to get some things fixed, and it would send us a pretty large quote to do that. You're already paying them $54,590 a year, and they won't do some stuff that we consider minor. I don't know what it really takes on their end, but.
So how long have we been in this relationship with Has Connect?
I believe it was probably either 2015 or 2016. It's about 11 years.
And it was good at the time.
Yeah.
But there's again, technology today and moving information to emergency responders, because I know I've been in the fire service 43 years. I never used it on emergency scene. Never. And it would be interesting if we could run a report, if you could tell, are there emergency responders of how many time they've logged into it in a year's time to see even how often it's getting opened up and used. I just know I never used it, and I don't know anybody that really ever used it on a scene. I know what happens every once in a while, but even just showing up on an EMS run, you would want to know what that facility does, because if it could be a burnt, then find out it's a chemical injury, So it's just one of my comments is we move on. I would like for us to kind of start shopping around. But then our budget, we spend every dime in that account right now, right? And if we went to a new system, I mean, there's setup fees and all that. It's going to be like a lot of money up front just to get it set up.
Mhm.
I mean, some of the programs that I deal with, it's $1 million or $2 million just to set the thing up, as big as we are in the state of Indiana. So anyway.
Do you know what our income was from the chemical fees that came to the IRC this year?
Lauren.
Year, I believe it was just right under $800,000, but it showed over because there was money that wasn't entered in the system previously for prior years.
So that's the total chemical fees collected, right? 800,000.
Yeah, right around that.
So the IRC gets what, 10, is it 10%? So we get about 80,000 a year in income from the fees.
The other money that doesn't.
Right, that
go to
doesn't
the
get-
LPCs
right.
goes back to the commission.
So I just think, and I think Jeff will probably tell us more later on, but the system that we're operating off of is back to the 1980s. The fees haven't changed.
Right.
Fees haven't changed since the 80s. Jeff will talk more about. So, it's one of those things that has sat on the books and we've operated like we have, and I'll let Jeff talk more about that.
Yeah. I guess, and that kind of leads to my concern is spending 125,000 a year is not really sustainable if we're only taking 80,000 a year.
Yeah, I mean,
And so,
our agency, Indiana Homeland Security, supplements this program, because right now it just pays for her spot. That Melissa's comes out of Indiana Homeland Security's budget. I guess at the end of the day, it's additional dollars out of Homeland Security's budget to support this program when we've got thousands and thousands of industry people who report in the system. So anyway, we'll talk about that when Jeff goes into his information. Facility report, Lauren.
So as of Friday morning, May 8th, we currently have a total of 8,018 facilities in Indiana. 7,217 of these facilities are active. 801 of these facilities are inactive. We've had a total of 6,867 annual reports that have been completed this year. 19 annual reports have been initiated but not completed by facilities. 354 of these facilities have not initiated this year's report. We have collected $677,000 since January 1st and had 6 incidents since our last meeting.
All those numbers, so we got 8,000 people coming into the system, but it's not self-sufficient.
And I will say on average, over the past 10 years, we collect about $640,000 to $650,000 on average.
Anybody have any questions over the facilities report? Thank you for that. And then under business review and action of the LEPC compliance for 2025, Melissa?
We have both of these pages going with us. This is just a rundown report of all of the counties that were active and ones that were not active and the reports that were completed and not completed. So we had 82 counties that were active this year. We had about 5 counties that maybe didn't complete all of the requirements, but they did attempt to complete most of the requirements. So we have 10 counties that were not active. They did not complete any reports at all. And were not active at all. You can find that on the second page. Here, they're listed out. And so after discussion with the team, we decided, we would like to recommend 82 counties receive their full funding this year, and then 10 the counties that were not active at all to obviously not receive any funding or the distribution monies. And that would be on this list. Like I said, this is just a comprehensive list. The very last page listed out counties that put their LEPC plan in. They were after the October 17th date that's recommended that it be in by. So, but they were in by December 31st and were compliant. And the color code key is on the very last page for the comprehensive list. Well,
I'll just kind of, our history before I got here. If they didn't have everything done, this commission did not give them money. And there's a lot of different reasons of maybe where they didn't get 100% of their stuff done. Maybe they didn't have quorum at their last meeting, or there's a lot of different reasons. And so my thought at the time, and I think the commission's thought, was they're trying. And if we don't give those counties funds, it penalizes the emergency responders, the boots on the ground. They don't get any money. And so my thought, or our thought, hopefully, was if they're trying and they don't get everything done, is to give them funding. And so we've, over time, I guess, changed to the people that are trying, let's give them funding. That money is intended for the emergency responders and training them to deal with chemical situations. And so we have 10 that didn't do anything. You know, we knock on the door, nobody opens, nobody enters, there's nobody working. And then we do have 82 counties that have either done everything or they have done something to try to comply. So that's kind of our reasoning, and get a consensus. Is that good with everybody, that we fund 82 counties and then the 10%?
Does the funding go to the LEPC or to the EMA?
It goes to the LEPC. And some of those counties don't even have an LEPC. They can't get people interested in filling it.
And is the funding based upon the size of the county, or is it an annual amount that each LEPC gets, pro rata across?
I think it's the amount of facilities they have in their county.
Based on facilities, okay.
Yes.
According to the number of facilities, okay.
So. Anybody have any comments, questions before we take a vote?
I guess my only concern is kind of some of these I can see we got real close, but didn't quite make it. But there's a couple that only had 1 or 2 items they provided. And so, I mean, for the ones that did meet all the requirements, it's got to look like, well, why do I bother meeting all these if I can get funding I only do one or two of them. I guess I'm just concerned, is there some way to send a message, okay, we're funding you this year, but next year, if you don't have a better performance,
Yeah,
you're
but
not gonna be
I
funded.
guess my response to that is these rosters that we just 92 counties of how
Uh-huh.
many people, they change all the time.
Right.
So the people you want to say, okay, but next year is not the same people we're dealing with next year.
We got a lot of changes already.
Yeah, there's a lot of changes that go in. At the end of the day, these dollars are intended for the emergency responders. If we at least have somebody that when we knock on their door, they open it up and say, we are here, they're not fully functioning. At least there's a way the dollars are going to the emergency responders. That's kind of my thought. Because if we went through each one of these independently, county by county, and we wanted to give them a percent, we would be here 4 days.
Well, and I don't think the statute's set up, you can't do it that way.
Out of the ones that participated this year that weren't able to complete all of the requirements. A few of the other counties, I think about a handful of those. I tried to have 4 meetings, but one of them was not valid for whatever reason. They were missing, minus 1 person maybe, or 2 people. So I do believe actually that most of the counties have the message that, we want, them to completely participate. And I just think the other 5, like the fire marshal was saying, they had a lot of people change in the LAPC and people doing the reports. And so maybe the ball got dropped a little bit, but they were attempting to be compliant for the years.
And we're dealing with volunteer help.
I understand.
Nobody.
Well, yeah, and I don't disagree with that. My concerns with kind of the message it sends to the counties that LAPCs that did meet all the requirements and if they're aware of counties that didn't meet all the requirements, but still got funding, it kind of brings the question for them, why should I bother worrying about having meetings or doing everything?
The people that are trying to do the right thing and do everything and they get it all in, they're going to get funded. And if they have the attitude is, well, I'm only going to do a couple things because I'll get funding anyway, I can't help that. So that's just my thought, is I hope that everybody that gets everything done are not the type of people. It's like, well, I don't really have to do any of it much because I'll get funding anyway,
Well, I guess the one that jumps out at me is the Jefferson County one. There's only 2 things that they
I know
did. And I don't know if that's one of those where they did have 4 meetings, but just couldn't quite get a quorum. And
I just know I have a guy on a fire engine that counts on that funding.
So was that the fact that they have meetings, they just didn't make quorums, or did they?
They have meetings. I think there were about 5 counties that had meetings, but they were literally missing maybe 1 person. I have spoken with all of those counties and encouraged them to actually try to have an electronics policy in their bylaws so that they could include people online to help help that in the future for them to meet quorum. So I know of at least 3 of them already did that. And the other 2 were trying to find more members. So I believe that they're working on it.
That's
some of these rural areas. Internet, okay? I'm used to the big city, but after running around the county and all the counties in Indiana, there's counties who don't even have internet. And you start talking about video meetings and they can't even get cell service in their house to call out. I've got employees that I can't talk to when they're at home,
I'll give an example. Just last year, I worked a case with the fire department in a rural area. And the fire chief said, hey, we're doing a lot better this year. I said, why is that? He said, we were finally able to buy a computer. So
I know with the electronics policy, it has already helped some of the LAPCs though, because I started at the beginning of the year trying to encourage all of them to include the electronics policy. And so I've already had some positive feedback saying that it did help. So.
Mhm.
If they do have it and they can, and they're having trouble meeting for them, I think it's a positive.
Any other comments before we take a vote? Do I have a motion?
Make a motion.
Second. What's the motion?
Funding for the counties.
Funding for all the counties that have a lease trial.
Yeah.
Okay, do I have a second motion? That's all right.
A second.
Second. Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All in opposed?
Next on the agenda, we have one of the things that we talked about in this meeting is to have a idea about the different hazmat teams. We've got counties that don't have anything. And then we have some areas where we have pretty robust hazmat teams. But we have hazardous materials facilities in all counties. We have highways in most of our counties who they don't even have a paid fire department. So Russ Fuqua is going to be our guest speaker today, even though he's not my guest. He works for me every day.
Thank you, Marshall. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Russell Fuqua. I'm a hazardous materials specialist for the Indiana Department of Homeland Security Office of the State Farm. My jurisdiction consists of 32 counties in southwest Indiana. I've been doing this for about 4 years here in September. Prior to that, I did 30 years on the Terre Haute Fire Department with 15 of those as hazmat. The question that I was presented was, where are the hazmat teams located inside the state of Indiana? As you can see here, there is myself in the blue, Michael White and Bill Huffer, who are the other two hazmat specialists that we have here in Indiana. Our hazmat jurisdictions are quite large, and inside each of those jurisdictions is the number of active hazmat teams that operate at a technician level inside our jurisdictions.
Just for the people who don't understand, Bill, Michael, and Russ, they all work for the State Fire Marshal's office. And so we have 3 state hazmat specialists that have designated areas who assist the hazmat teams within those jurisdictions.
And a brief rundown, our day job is inspecting and permitting explosive storage at explosive magazines. We also respond to hazmat spills and emergencies inside each of our jurisdictions. If it is something major, you will get 2 out of the 3 of us. We're also the main drone operator for IDHS and the sole drone operator for the Marshal's office. And we also assist the state fire investigators when needed. We are all certified as Fire Investigator 1 to keep us inside the chain of custody. Bill, for the most part, up in the north, has the lion's share of the hazardous material teams. He has 18 technician level teams. That is mainly because of the amount of hazardous materials that pass through there on a daily basis, coming out of the rail yards up in Chicago and heading east. Mike has the next largest, which also includes Marion County. I have the fewest, and as you'll see here later on, where all of these individual teams are located. Up north, these are each one of the fire departments or each one of the communities in Bill's region that has a technician level hazmat response team. As you'll see here later on, a lot of these teams overlap, which is a good thing. If one's not available, then another one is. Counties that don't have hazardous material teams, we encourage them to get what's called a MOU or memorandum of understanding with another county or another department that does have a hazardous materials team. So in the event they do have a hazmat incident in their county, all they have to do is pick up the phone or go dispatch to dispatch and that team can be immediately dispatched. If you do not have an MOU, now we're calling another fire department. That fire department has to get a hold of their chief. If it's a county department, sometimes it's a trustee, county commissioner. Things have to go up the chain and then back down again, which means the response takes longer. Oh, sorry about that. Okay. Here's the list of the fire departments that Mike has over in his jurisdiction, which includes, mind you, greater Cincinnati hazmat. Fire departments will cross state lines if needed in the event of an emergency. Down in my jurisdiction, like down around Jeffersonville, all the way down in Clark County. If the event is large enough, they will call on Louisville Fire.
Mutual aid cross. Yes, sir, for a small part of it.
Greater Cincinnati, don't they pay for that? Don't the counties in that area?
I don't know if they pay a annual fee, but if you call a hazardous material team in to your county will be billed for it directly, or they will be, billing the spiller. There's a number of different ways that this can be approached. One of the things is who's actually billing the spiller. Is it the hazmat team? Is it the county? Is it the fire department who responded?
Right, my point was, this is not a traditional fire department arrangement. Greater Cincinnati hazmat is improved that it's on contract with those counties.
Yeah, and that would be part of the MOU. It's understood, it goes through everybody's legal department that they are responsible if called upon for hazardous material response in a given area. Mine down in the southwest, we have Terre Haute Fire, Vincennes, Crane Naval Base. Their fire department has a hazardous materials team, even though they are federal. But they used to be allowed to go off base, but due to staffing requirements right now, they're able to take care of things on the base and they're not able to leave at this time. My newest hazardous material team is right here, which is DuBois County. They have decided that they wanted to form a hazardous materials team, and they are right about 2 years old on that. And I welcome them. This is what they look like on a map. You can see up in the northern corridor where all of the majority of our hazardous materials flow is where the lion's share is. And then up in Tippecanoe County, it seems like there's an awful lot there, but you have, Purdue Fire Department, West Lafayette Fire Department, Lafayette Fire Department. You have Tippecanoe County, you have a lot right there, right inside Tippecanoe County. The same as you have right there in Marion County, because Marion County Health, IFD, everybody is right in inside the same county. So there's some, and then you have some like down here with Jeffersonville and Clarksville. A lot of times two smaller fire departments will combine to make one hazardous materials team because they just can't do it on their personnel wise. Terre Haute and Vigo County are able to each function separately on their own, but a lot of times just due to manpower issues, they will combine. Vigo County may have the equipment, but Terre Haute has the hazmat technicians. We almost lost Vincennes Township down here in Knox County. And talking with Chief Smith directly, he was unable to vote, fund it at the time. And he was looking at going back to an operations level only fire department, which is the bare minimum that a fire department can be. If I would have lost them at the technician level, if the chief would have pulled the plug on the program, that leaves a pretty big gap in here as far as response wise goes. As you can see in the next slide, that's about a half hour drive in every direction. So you can see the amount of coverage that we have, and you can see where the gaps are throughout the state. That's another reason that this funding is so important. Chief Smith was able to secure funding His county had not been compliant a couple years in a row. But their county has since been compliant, and they were able to use that funding to get the hazmat suits that they needed. They were using and testing suits that were 12 years old, which as an industry standard is pretty risky. They had suits, at least one suit fail every year. These suits cost anywhere from $900 to $1,500 each, depending on what you're wanting, the level of protection that you need. And you need a minimum of 8 or 9 suits to even make entry, because you have a 3-man team, 3-4-man team going in. You have to have a 3 or 4-man team on standby in case something happens. So that's at a bare minimum. And if we would have lost any more of his funding, his hazmat program would have folded. But he was able to locate some more money, and their county has since been in compliance ever since. So their LAPC funds are building up. But these hazmat teams, hazmat teams are expensive. Filters expire sitting on the shelf. They have to be replaced. Hazmat suits can only be tested so many times. If they're used, it's one and done. You use it and you throw it away, you bill, to get these things replaced. But if they're not used sitting on the shelf, they still have to be tested. They still have to comply because somebody's, sorry, my laptop died. I didn't plug it in.
Do you need a plug?
Okay.
I apologize. Battery doesn't last very long on that.
Russell, maybe getting to this, but are all hazmat teams created equal? Meaning all can do the same level?
Yes, sir. Everybody is held to the same standard. There's a ranking system from FEMA. Everyone in the state of Indiana would be classified as a class 3 hazmat team, which means they are able to perform certain functions. There are some that may be at a level 2, but it all comes down to pieces of equipment, meters and so forth. And that is where the hazmat specialists come in. We help with hazmat identification on unknowns, and we have some of the meters and things that they don't have. The 3 hazmat specialists here in Indiana, we stay in close contact with our hazmat teams. A lot of the fire chiefs or even the special operation chiefs or hazmat chiefs will end up calling us directly if they have something. But they're not necessarily, sometimes it's just a simple notification that they do have an incident and they do not need our assistance. The other calls we get are for, this is what we have. Are we doing the right thing? Are we going down the right road? A lot of times IDEM ends up getting the notification and their emergency response folks are already on scene, or vice versa. And we have a very good relationship with our IDEM partners. And this is part of their jurisdictions that they have. And Myra, please correct me if but
That's accurate.
they have 10 on-scene coordinators, 1 spill response coordinator, 1 section chief, 5 regional offices dispatched through the IDEM spill line or the IDHS watch desk after hours. And we do have a great partnership with them. We work with our IDEM partners constantly. If we get called, we think it's something they need to know about, we let them know, make sure someone has called the spill line to report this, and vice versa. A lot of times we'll just get a notification call, hey, just want to let you know we're on scene, we're working on this. Don't think you need to come out, but just as a courtesy, here we are. So this is another good resource that we have inside the state of Indiana here. It's not just the three of us or not just the 10 of them. It's 13 plus individuals who are working all towards a common goal, hazardous material safety in Indiana. Some of the information, everybody is at least a FEMA type 3, as Matt was talking about. Counties with hazmat teams are encouraged to reach out are encouraged to reach out and create an MOU with their responding department or county. This enables a faster response. A lot of times the receiving county will be asked when they do form an MOU, say with Monroe Fire Territory, they'll say, can you make sure that your fire department is able to do operations level decontamination, which helps out the hazmat team a great deal. Because a hazmat team that can send 4 people or 6 people outside their jurisdiction to go help someone else is a lot better, because it leaves a lot more personnel back at their home station and back in their home territory. If the receiving fire department can handle the operations level decontamination, which means they need to buy some pools and things like that. So these receiving counties need the LEPC funding as well, so they can buy decon showers and things to assist the responding hazmat team. If they don't have that capability, then that means the hazmat team has to bring decon personnel and equipment as well, which usually completely robs the responding county of their hazmat capabilities. So that's, once again, even the counties that don't have hazardous material teams, they need this funding as well. And I had asked the marshal here last year, because I was getting these questions. Can hazmat teams receive money from LEPCs over in other counties? And if these hazmat teams are responding, especially if they have MOUs and things like that, absolutely. You know, because everybody is here to help. And if we can get, make things a little bit better with multiple efforts from multiple counties, then we are all for that. Like I said, hazmat response teams are expensive to maintain. Respirator cartridges expire on the shelf. Meters need calibration gas. The meters go down. They need to have sensors replaced. Their calibration at least every 6 months, if not more. The sad part is when fire department budgets have shortfalls, they look at eliminating hazmat, because even though hazmat can bill, sometimes there's not that many hazmat runs. There's not that many hazmat incidents to fund the program. And most of these programs operate in the red. And if it's not, and so they rely on the LEPC funding to help maintain a lot of their programs. And that's the situation that Chief Smith was looking at over at Vincennes Township. But he was able to find some funding in the meantime. Imagine the map that we just saw with even fewer circles on it. When those circles start disappearing and we have large gaps. And there's interstates that run through every one of those gaps just about. Interstate 70, Interstate 64, 65, north and south, 74. Does anybody have any questions or any comments over anything that I covered? Yes, sir.
I just have a comment, because this conversation is focused on hazmat teams. But every fire engine, every ladder company, they should have a 4-gas meter. Every one of these make hazardous materials runs, even though they're not a formalized hazmat team. So a 4-gas meter tests for how much oxygen is in the air. It tests for flammability, if they're going to be in a flammable atmosphere. Most of them take H2S, which is hydrogen sulfide. Most fires gives off hydrogen sulfide, which we don't want our frontline firemen exposed to that, and carbon monoxide. And so even though we're talking about hazardous materials teams, I want us to always remember that first arriving unit is a hazardous materials view. Even if it's just a police officer, they need to be trained to be aware of what they're walking into. And there's some pretty gross videos of police officers walking into an atmosphere of where they're not aware of what the dangers are. And so this funding that we're giving counties is for all the emergency responders, our ambulance people. We don't want them to go into an EMS situation, not realizing what the chemical injuries and what dangers they present to themselves. And so we generally focus on hazmat teams, but all 92 counties respond to hazardous materials incidents every day. Indiana has 8,000 runs a day that gets dispatched in Indiana. There's about 300 that's police runs, and the rest are fire and EMS. Every day, we have sirens in Indiana on all the time in Indiana. To deliver public safety, it's a huge job. And I don't want us to get too focused on just hazmat teams. So we got to concentrate on them. But it happens on every engine, and we don't have it. We don't have 4 gas meters on every fire engine. Volunteer world, but like he said, the calibration of those instruments need to be done multiple times a year to make for sure they're reading right. And those components have an expiration date, and that just varies on manufacturer, but they have to be replaced every 2 years or whatever the manufacturer says. So they're disposable items of some of those stuff that we use all the time. And like he said, the level A hazmat suits, they have a shelf life. After so long, you got to get rid of them. So I just wanted to throw that out there that hazmat, let's just not focus on hazmat team, although very important, is my first arriving units that need training, that need some sort of equipment for gas meters. Yeah, I just don't think we have them enough. And I've seen 2 cases in Indiana, firefighters that they were inside of a building with a gas leak and it exploded twice this year while firefighters were inside the structure with a gas leak. It exploded while they were inside, and we're lucky we didn't lose any firefighters in those cases. Maybe next time I'll bring a video. It's on video with 4 firefighters responding to a gas leak, and they had a camera in the room when it exploded. And it's just, we need our hazardous materials training and make people aware. So that's all I got, right?
But just like the marshal said, every gas leak call that we end up making on the fire department, that's considered hazardous materials. Every, mainly during the winter time when furnaces are up and firing, I mean, carbon monoxide, that's a hazardous material spill. Things like that. I mean, some of the, the overturned tanker on the interstate and things like that are one thing, but then we have the smaller ones that are unit size that are happening every day. So if anybody has any questions, here's my contact information. Please feel free to get a hold of me, or grab me here. I'll be here during the entire meeting. Yes, Myra.
Comment, the map was very interesting. It would be really cool to maybe overlay like your hazmat teams along with the number of facilities across reporting facilities. And then maybe not just the facilities, but also the hazmat teams with number of incidents. I don't know, within like a 5-year period or a year period, just to kind of get an idea of like where it's most busy, where we have coverage in the most busy areas, and then where we might need more hazmat teams.
Yeah, I mean, you look at how much hazmat runs through Indiana. They may not stop, like you said, northern Indiana coming out of Chicago, whether it's tanker trucks or cargo trucks or rail. from Chicago. It's huge, the amount of hazardous materials that run through northern Indiana. It's unbelievable how much moves through the northern Indiana. And as we expand and want more economic development and bring industry with that brings more chemicals. So
Do we have good visibility, like the memorandums of the MOUs and memorandums of understanding? So based on, do we know at the state level how many of those that we have within 90?
no, we don't. And just for your knowledge, and this is where I guess one of the things, me as the state fire marshal under Indiana code, I have the ability to move fire departments in the state of Indiana. If we had a big incident, I could call the fire department and tell them, you need to go respond to what they may not have an MOU in place. But one of the functions of me as the state fire marshal, I have the ability to move fire departments and go have them respond. And, you know, a lot of these departments, they don't have their own attorney. You talk about it. You know, anything I want to do as state fire marshal, I got scrutinized by 6 of my attorneys. It's a good thing. At first, I didn't know why I needed an attorney or this many. I know now why I had that many. MOUs are important, but you know, you go to Orange County, every fire department in that county is a volunteer fire department. They have no paid fire departments in Orange County. For them to create an MOU and all those things, it's difficult.
There's a lot of counties that they have a hazmat incident. They make the decision then on what they're going to do with it. They don't have any plans in place. It's who do we call for this? And
it
maybe one of the
takes-
specialists that get the call to help them, you know, track them in the right direction. They may just, you know, I live in Pike County. They may just automatically assume Evansville's going to come out. Somebody's going to come and take care of it.
And that happens a lot. There's sometimes, you know, I mean, to get a hazmat team up and then travel, you're looking at least an hour.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why the training of those first responders is so important. Just the awareness is if everybody is evacuated for the appropriate amount and it goes absolutely wrong, at least I have life safety. Everybody's away from it. Nobody is hurt. Nobody is injured. It may take an hour to get the hazmat team there, but that's why those people are so important, is to make for sure they understand the hazard and how far to get them away. Because it may be an hour before we get a hazmat team on scene. So
Isolate and deny entry is the number one thing on the hazmat response.
Are all the hazmat teams associated with a fire department? Or do some of the teams have members that are from other groups within the county other than the fire?
yeah,
department?
the emergency management, some of them form a hazmat team and they have members of different fire departments that
Like
come
DuBois
together.
County.
Yeah,
That was how they formed.
But it is fire department personnel.
Yes, sir.
In all the.
There's no
hazardous
private,
response teams.
yeah, there's no private hazmat response. I know of someone who tried to start a private hazmat response, you know, to, you know, contract out and things like that, and he's not being very successful.
Do they ever have personnel though that are outside the fire department but local, like from medical or other first responder type?
I would say, and I guess our Lilly people can speak with that, because back in my day when I was on Marion County Hazmat, we had Eli Lilly had their own hazmat teams and we trained side by side with their, you know, and so.
So say those, the or the company ones would be personnel within the company. I guess I'm
Yeah.
just trying to understand for all the hazmat response teams, is it purely fire personnel that are members of that, or do they include other first responders outside of the fire department?
It's mainly fire
That's,
personnel.
okay, that's
Yeah,
what,
there's
that's the
a
impression I
very,
had.
very small. That is not.
Okay.
Find it interesting, sorry, new girl, but, I'm sorry.
You're okay.
Um, how many of these areas where we see gaps
Mhm.
are the 10 counties that we just voted on that aren't gonna,
Well,
because I see like one of them is not receiving funding, but they've got a hazmat team. LaPorte County is in the group that's not receiving funding, but they have a hazmat team. How many of them are not, and I know you can't force compliance, I get that. But how many of them, of those that aren't able to get compliance right now, are those gaps that you see?
let's see.
You'd have to go through.
Not, I have like 5 in my jurisdiction
Okay,
that are either not in compliance or I have 5 that are inactive,
okay,
I would say.
okay.
They do not have hazardous material teams inside their county. Of my 5. I can't speak to the others. That would be up to the marshal.
Yeah, and you know, in our world, in the fire world, we get funding several different ways, you know. And so you might have like LaPorte, who the
Yeah.
fire department, the taxpayers in LaPorte are funding that fire department
Okay.
to have that hazardous material. This is not the only funding that goes into making up a hazardous materials response.
Ours is probably actually the smaller
Yeah, ours is.
portion of what
Yeah,
they get.
but it takes a lot, you know, when it's
Very
LaPorte, you know,
defense.
they're paying, their firefighters probably mostly to respond to regular incidents, but when a hazmat run comes out, they have a team to respond if they are not on another run somewhere else. And that happens from time to time. I saw a comment in the back.
If you guys remember, I'm Larry Hamby. I covered the north, I was a hazmat specialist with the marshal's office for 30 years. I covered the whole north. And we used to have like a team. So Russell took the place of one of my other co-partners, Stan Capiabanco, who had the south. And so when you look at what makes up a hazmat team, up north, you take Lake County, it's run by the county. The county kind of come together, it's firefighters, it's health, it's EMS. Porter County, LaPorte County, they're volunteers. They run it like a volunteer fire department, but they fall under the county government for their position. South Bend Fire, Elkhart Fire, they have what we would call a hazmat team to respond. But just keep in mind, the only ones that truly benefit from a hazmat team are the ones that own it. They're the ones that's going to be out the door first and cover that area within that 30 minutes. I'm from Miami County. I'm still on my fire department there. We have Bristol. Bristol's a great resource, but they can't respond to a base, just like down south. They're limited on funding or staffing rather. So, I mean, it changes almost daily. Who's doing what when that incident happens? And it's a challenge. It always has been. And I know when I first came on the board, I was Bernie Byer back then. We looked at training and different things of that nature. And it's a challenge because again, the local government changes pretty regular and there's no stability. There really isn't at the local level. And now we do. We have businesses coming into the area. In my jurisdiction, in my fire department, we're still volunteer, but we're trying to become a fire territory. Because things are changing. I covered the state prison, Miami Correctional. I cover what's left of the Grissom Air Reserve Base. It's an active runway. We have commercial aircraft coming in there every week to get repainted. Okay, I have 2 nursing homes. It wasn't that way when I joined 38 years ago. And so, but they bring their own hazards. And I don't call them a hazard, don't get me wrong here. Arizona Isotopes, they make medical isotopes. I cover that facility and stuff. So it's made a challenge for my firefighters to understand radiation and understand the real issues with it. That it's not as bad as people make it out to be and stuff, but it's an education. And now they're proposing a data center. And so we're dealing with those issues. So as I'm for economic development and all that, you got to keep in mind it brings hazmat with it, because hazmat is the building blocks of our economy. Those little molecules make up everything we do. And I can speak from my daughter works for you guys at Lilly. She's at the Heart Institute facility, and she's an industrial hygienist. I got her to hook up with Jeff many years ago. And stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's been great. I mean, it's just a small community, and I just commend you guys for still sticking with it.
Yeah.
And but it is a challenge.
Yeah.
We do have a question online for you. Have you seen an increase in hazmat response for lithium ion battery incidents?
We did for a while. I'm not aware of any, there's no reporting. And it was a really big deal to begin with, and fire departments have really toned it down a lot. And a lot of it is just staying at the local level. So I'm not, unless they report it directly to me or they end up reporting it to their LEPC, we're not made aware of it.
Again, these cars that runs off the batteries anymore. You know, it's kind of a hazmat incident, but it doesn't go down in the books as a hazmat. It's cart fire still, right? So that's why I always go back to those first responders, see more hazmat runs than our hazmat teams by far. So thank you, Russ.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it. Just wanted to, while I'm thinking about it, making a little bit of adjustment under number 7 on the agenda after Bruce gives his, Jeff Larmore, he's going to talk about the tier 2 thing. So add that to your agenda. I forgot to mention that early on. So I very much appreciate your work on that, Russ. Sometimes it's like anything else. I can sit behind a desk and not hear about really what's going on, the boots on the ground, you know, and appreciate your work on that. Next on the agenda is Melissa discussing about the process merging counties, LEPCs. We talked a lot about today about these counties that do not have LEPCs, and she's worked a lot on getting at least the framework of putting together what it would take to have counties merge together to do the work. So Melissa?
So I know we talked about this a little bit at the last meeting, but we have some numbers, so I'll just recap. So the Indiana code does provide for LEPCs to merge, but it's very brief. It doesn't really give a lot of instructions on how the LEPC should do that. And we had we have 4 different counties that were wanting to possibly merge. And a lot of questions about that at the end of last year. So I started working with Sean Wooding on this to try to formulate some kind of organizational plan on how the LEPCs could merge in an organized way. And I believe we did have 2 counties in years past that had tried to merge, and it lasted for maybe a month or 2, which is obviously not the goal. You know, we want something that is more sustainable. And so there are a lot of questions that need to be answered on that, on the process of how to do it. So one of the things that we put together was the organizational agreement to merge county local emergency planning committees. This is like a formal agreement, legal agreement. Now the LEPCs don't have to use this. We want to be able to possibly put this out there. So if the LEPCs want to use what we have, that they can. It's always got to be up to their county attorney as well, and their LEPCs to actually work out their formal process. But we would like to give some kind of guideline, because we've been asked for that from the LEPCs, that they could have some kind of guidelines on how to do this process. So we also put together a local emergency planning committee guidelines for merging. And so you all had this at the last meeting, and I sent this again 2 weeks ago. And what I was hoping the IERC could do is suggest any changes or anything different that they might want to see in this organizational merging process. This agreement has already been approved by legal, unless also if the IRC would like to see any changes in that, we can do that. But just so you know, this was already approved by legal. But this merging process also we would like to put out there with this. And there are a lot of, questions that needed to be agreed upon probably so that both LAPCs, when they do merge, can have a complete understanding of how the process is going to work for them and what they'll get out of it and how the changes will occur. So again, this is not anything that the LAPCs would have to use. They can come up with their own, but I feel like these guidelines could help make a sustainable process for this to happen. And give a clear understanding, like I said, to both counties and LAPCs of what to expect.
Just curious, Melissa, so you said we tried it once, it lasted a month. So what were the issues or?
So I don't really have a lot of information on it. The information I had actually, Mr. Larmore gave to me. And it was just briefly, it mentioned in an old IERC meeting minutes that the counties had talked about merging and then had merged in the very next meeting minutes. They had disbanded already. And so I think the biggest issue in this that I see obviously is going to be the money, right? So, the LAPC, if there is no LAPC, obviously they should not be spending LAPC funds because they don't have any valid way to really do that kind of business if they're not meeting and they're not voting. So I had put in here that when the LAPCs merge, whoever is taking over the other county becomes the board county. That's what it says in the Indiana code. They should also then get the monies that are being held so that they can be used for the purposes that they're meant to be used for. And so we don't obviously want an LAPC taking over another LAPC for a month or two, taking all their money and then saying, here you go, have that, right? So we want something that is obviously, acceptable by all parties.
And again, when we go back, is these are volunteer people that don't have any help to do MOUs and attorneys to help them. Melissa's worked with all her attorneys to help give them guidelines on if you want to merge, here's the playbook, on how you can get it done. Hopefully they'll take advantage of it. But again, if you knock on the door, nobody opens, there's nobody to give this to, And again, we're working on a system back from the 1980s where we had more community involvement in everything, emergency service. We don't get that anymore. People are busy trying to. I saw this morning that Indiana was the highest expense on raising children of any state in the union right now. They don't have, a lot of people don't have time for community service, and everything that they do is trying to keep their families afloat right now. At least in my view. And so this is a good thing to use to help people be able to solve their problem. If they don't have an LAPC, is at least get them in the process of merging so they can use these funds to help in their county. So.
As the marshal alludes all the time when he speaks to staff, and I agree, we're trying to take out hurdles, any hurdles we can take, any excuse we can take out for an LAPC, we want to do that. We want to make things easier for locals.
Like if you're not functioning, you don't get funds, here's a way to help. Merge with somebody else. Again, it says first due units. I keep wanting to stress that, it's the police, it's the ambulance services, it's volunteer fire departments. You have nobody batting for them. I want to be able to get in their corner and try to help provide them with some tools.
I was just wondering if Jasmine maybe has any comment on counties working as far as the Indiana code is concerned.
I don't, I haven't had an opportunity to review the agreement that she mentioned, so.
I have a silly question. What's the interest agreement? Is it just automatically renewable?
So I can't remember.
If you guys were to enter into an agreement, is it just automatically renewal every year or?
So this is something that we're not going to oversee. State is not going to oversee. This is going to have to go through their county attorneys and their LAPC members. So we're not going to be, saying exactly how they do it. We just want to try to give guidelines in the event that they do.
In the perfect world, we're doing 8,000 runs in the state of Indiana. We need people in the seats that are gonna be there all the time. Providing a volunteer LAPC where nobody's there. I need somebody in the seat to oversee what's happening, to make for sure that the emergency responders have funding,
And have the dissolution arrangement in here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's some notice provided there. It doesn't just disappear.
Again, this is just a guideline for them right now. We're just trying to help provide them a way. If they're not getting funding, we can help get them funding and use the county next door, whoever they want to form with to meet the requirements, to get the funds to the people there who need it. So.
Can we ask what counties were interested? Is that appropriate? Can we ask what counties were interested in merging?
So, I'm hesitant to say.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Totally fine.
So I'm in Gibson County. I don't remember what it was. We weren't quite compliant. But there were some neighboring counties that weren't either. Knox and Pike. And Knox has the hazmat team, which Russell spoke about. But it was like, we have funding that we're not using right now that they could use. So maybe we could merge together and, either one or the other, and maybe we could become compliant.
Got it.
So I'll give one example is Brown County. And they didn't actually know who they wanted to merge with, but they don't have any facilities in their county right now that have EHS above TPQ. So that's extremely hazardous substance above the threshold planning quantity. So they don't feel like they need to participate because the only thing that they would be getting is the base amount, $2,500. And they don't have hazmat teams because, they don't feel like they need them. They don't have any facilities. So I mean, that was one, but they didn't even know who they wanted to merge with.
That's fair.
Yeah.
No, that's,
And, it's just, and that's where, is education is huge. They may not have a facility, but they have hazardous materials that travel through Brown County all the time. They've got pipelines running through Brown County, and it's education and I don't know, that's why we're here is to help. Help educate, help funding, any way that we can do that.
Right now, this is only set up for 2 counties merging and not more than 2. Also. So. But I just want the IRC to be on board with this if we do give out these guidelines. Or make it
Backspace
available.
free.
Marshall, I have a question for you. And,
Yeah.
I've been serving on our county EMA board for quite a few years as mayor and other representatives across the county. Why is there an LEPC versus just having these services, the coordination go through EMA?
It's a federal requirement that went back in the eighties. And so the federal government told the states, this is how you're gonna do it. Boom. And so we're following federal law.
I'm just wondering if there's
Yeah,
not
that's
a
so,
policy initiative that modernize how
Yeah.
emergency, because, going through almost 7 years of EMA meetings, never once a single LEPC meeting. In fact, I didn't even know what it stood for until a couple of years ago. I started asking, what's this LEPC board I keep
Yeah.
hearing about? And they aren't very active. And you're right, we're getting more and more constrained on volunteer resources. It maybe seems like, and I can't imagine many counties wanting to merge. I just know how territorial and difficult it is to coordinate across counties. It's been tried before in other parts of government services, just not very successfully, but maybe a policy initiative should be, being more effective and working with our delegation at the federal level as well as at the state to modernize some of these policies so we can get better outcomes.
you know, I don't want to go either way I like local rules, is for the locals to determine how they do business. Nobody at the local level wants the state or the federal government to tell them what to do, And so I hope to live in a world where everybody works together to understand what delivering public safety looks like. It's a big industry to deliver, like I said, 8,000 runs a day, just in our state. It takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of people, maybe not every county needs a full-blown hazmat team, but we need to be able to, I want the first responders to be educated to know when they're over their head. If it's gonna come out and bite them and kill them, or the community, I want them to at least recognize that, to back it out so they can wait for the right people to get there. But, yeah, that's a good question.
So if two counties do actually merge and form, UCMU, does the IDRC get a copy of that, or will we keep track of those? Is there something on Has Connect that can?
We haven't even
Yeah.
with the service with Has.
Right, gotcha. But I was just kind of wondering, we're offering guidance, which is great, and their legal folks can take whatever they want from the guidance and the template. But when they merge, will we know, which counties merge, when it was, and then when they dissolve, when will they let us know? I think I saw the resolution part in there, but just kind of for us to keep track of that.
I put it in here, being part of the merging process, that they would contact us. We don't have anything, I think that formally set up that says that they have to do this. So in the old IRC handbook, it does have some guidelines in there for the merging process that say that they do have to contact us
They'll
first.
have to. I mean, by necessity, they have to tell us, otherwise they don't get funding.
We have
So-
to move the roster.
Yeah, I think it's just by the way this is set up, they're gonna have to tell us, it's not gonna be a surprise.
Yeah, I think it's necessary that they should absolutely tell the IRC, and then we keep a record of it.
But the IRC is not required to approve mergers. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't want to dictate, how the locals do. Nobody wants that, so.
I think what Sean Wooding said last time, I don't like to speak for him, but I believe that he said that, it is ultimately up to the LEPCs though, and their responsibility as, for the merger. And it should go through their county attorneys and their LEPCs and their chairpersons, so.
Again, if I go back, their attorneys won't even know what they're looking at. Because unless you're looking at this stuff every day, there's attorneys who specialize on a lot of different things, but they are not the experts on everything, so that's why we're here. That's why we have attorneys to help give them guidance. So thank you, Melissa. Appreciate it. I'm gonna have to take off. I've got an appointment I've got to go to. Matt's gonna take over and I believe Mr. Palin, you're.
Next.
Yeah, thank you very much, though. I appreciate everybody's input. And if you have any questions or whatever, you can call me, email me, whatever. My phone's on 24/7. So thank you for everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. All right, I guess I'll go ahead and launch in and on the next agenda item. There've been feedback in the past that LAPCs have had difficulty meeting all the requirements, and obviously we've seen here that hasn't been an issue. One of the things that I told the fire marshal that I would take on is kind of looking at what are the things that we can change or things that we can modify that would help make their jobs easier and be able to comply with the requirements. And certainly the mayor's comments about this being something that was created many, many years ago, even before Homeland Security came along. There's been a lot of changes have occurred. Nothing has changed in either the federal or the state statutes. And so I think that, in a big picture, ideally, we'd be looking at what kind of modifications could be made there. And there's some things we could change in the state statute perhaps, and not worry about going astray of the federal requirements, but then there are certain things in our state statutes taking verbatim from the federal requirements. So we really don't have much option to change there.
Wouldn't a great option be able to delegate the responsibilities of the LE or of this organization to the EMA? I mean, even if it wasn't eliminating it, but delegating it? Because what I'm hearing over and over again is just a real struggle to get the LEPCs completely activated, have their regular meetings, have the policies in place, do the reporting.
Yeah.
And we want to give them funding, but I'm new to all this, but so I can tell you in 7 years of being at EMA or working with our EMA, they never talk about the LEPC.
Right.
And so I'm just wondering, is there not a option of maybe a bolder conversation to be having?
EMA director here.
Yeah, I'm curious. Yeah.
And so I also organize the meetings and things for the LAPC, but I try to pawn those duties off on the members. But putting more responsibility on EMAs with less money for us, I don't think that's a good option. Because
Just suggesting maybe.
I'm not the only EMA director in the county that's an office of one. So, and then plus.
I think it is a bigger,
Something to
it is a bigger
explore, right?
discussion.
Bigger
that
discussion.
we made, and certainly when you talk about making revisions to state statutes, you're talking a major project to undertake. I think you're right. I think it's probably long overdue. And I think that part of that should probably include discussion about the fees and how those are distributed. And I mean, right now, the state statute even sets out exactly how those fees are supposed to be distributed to each LEPC. Some states only have one LEPC for the entire state. Others, like Indiana, have gone to, individual counties each have their own LEPC. Some have done regional type LEPCs. As I mentioned, back when this created, Homeland Security didn't exist. Now there's Homeland Security regions that exist, and there's some overlaps with things that they're involved with as well. So to me, even the ideal situation, you'd go back to the federal level and relook at this whole structure and see if there can be revised and make more up to date and practical for kind of today's needs. Back then, it was responding to a need because of an incident that happened in India and the Bhopal chemical release. And so it was a reaction to that. It created this. And here we are many, many years later with so many different changes that have occurred in the world. And that's part of what I get into. There might be some tweaks that we could make still within our existing framework and regulatory requirements, statutory requirements that might make it a little bit easier for the LEPCs at least to function or meet their requirements. But I don't disagree. There's probably a bigger picture discussion that can be had. And I think it should be one that would include people in the regulated areas, the industry folks participating, as well as the local emergency responders and all the folks that are impacted by this need to have some input into, ideally, what would this look like and how can we change this?
We're about to see some major changes with FEMA. President Trump had issued an executive order. They've spent the past year studying the federal government's role in emergency response, and it's about to all get pushed down to the states.
Yeah.
And I'm saying is that it seems like we're long overdue for a policy discussion.
Yeah. I don't disagree.
Yeah.
But that really wasn't that's beyond what
I get it. I get it.
I was charged with here. So if I could launch into a little bit, and some of this, may need to have legal staff to look at. I guess the initial step was just to see if there was a sense amongst the membership and the board members here to maybe explore some of these things. But, life has changed significantly. And one of the biggest areas is just the electronics and the web didn't exist back when this was created. And, everybody relies on it now for their notice and to research information. And we're still referencing print media, which is kind of a dying art, which is even converted to electronic versions as well. So I guess the first thing on my list was a roster approval, which we did go through a roster approval today. I think the guidance that we've been giving LEPCs in the past is that they need to notify us anytime somebody drops off the LEPC, and anytime they add somebody new to the LEPC, and then that list gets brought to us for approval. And at least from my perspective, it's more of an administrative rubber stamp situation because we don't know who these individuals are or why we would have any objection to a particular person. They're certainly not going to be able to object to somebody dropping off because I can't make them participate. And new people we're just not that familiar with. And so some of the LEPCs have indicated it's kind of difficult to keep up with that process. And I talked to Melissa about whether it would be appropriate to just have at each of our meetings, give us the current up-to-date list, which they do. And then maybe you could help me with this a little bit. They do update on the electronic reporting changes to their roster. And so we could access that before every meeting and just print out, here's the existing roster that would be current.
And this is what those look like.
Okay.
So if you want to look at them, I've got two different books up here.
I mean, the statute requires us to approve the roster, any changes. A way to do that, though, that would avoid them having to send us a list. Well, here's who dropped off, here's who came on, is we just take a look at and they do that as that occurs, as I understand, in the electronic system.
Yeah, and this has all of their information on there. It has their name, it has the position that they're filling in the LEPC, and their contact information, whether a primary or proxy.
Yeah.
So
we could just, as a part of our normal business, approve that list every meeting and avoid them having to petition us every time there's changes to their roster because it's kept up to date there. And so that would make it easier for them to comply with that. And I think, again, the attorneys would need to look at that. Well, I don't think there would be a problem with us handling it that way. We have to, the statute requires us to approve the roster. Doesn't necessarily require us to look at every individual that fell off and was added, as long as we approved whatever the current roster is for that. Yeah.
I'm not sure if we can do it that way.
But that's certainly a change. It'd be eliminate some bureaucracy to the process and make it a little bit easier for folks to comply. The second thing that ran into is that the statute requires that there be representation on the LEPC from the broadcast and print media. Well, it doesn't really, back when this was written, broadcast meant television or radio, and print media meant newspapers. Over time, that certainly has changed as far as how people get their information. And so there had been some inquiries, I guess, as to whether folks who are involved with electronic media could be included in that. It's qualifying as a broadcast and print media type individual that could be put on the LEPC then and serve that purpose, which from my perspective makes a lot of sense and is a kind of a reasonable update to the way things are moving as far as information anyway. So I think that, again, that may be something that the attorneys may look at, make sure they agree that broadcast could include electronic broadcasting through podcasts or other types of electronic media. And even a lot of the newspapers have gone to online presence, even though they may have eliminated their print presence. So, that was the second item. The third was this one. I did some research to try and figure out where this came from. And the only place I can find is that we have an IRC handbook online that we created. Oh, it's probably been 10 years ago or so now. And it has a requirement that each LEPC publish an annual legal notice that identifies when and where they're going to be holding their meetings throughout the year, as well as where you can find their emergency plan. And the statute only requires you to comply with the open door law for meeting notices. And the open door law says you just post a notice 48 hours in advance of your meeting at the location where you're going to be having the meeting. And so to have, well, the first problem is there isn't a legal, a lot of newspapers have folded. There's not a reasonable place to publish those legal notices. And even if you do, I'm not sure how many folks actually go through and would read that notice once a year. Plus, typically, there's some price involved with paying to post those notices. So my suggestion is that we revise our handbook and to eliminate that requirement, essentially. That we just require that they comply with the open door law for notices. And a lot of the counties have their own websites and where they would post where they're going to be having their meetings, and there's certainly a lot of other different ways to inform people where meetings are being held and when, and there would probably be a lot more useful than an annual publication notice in the legal notices for the newspaper. So I would recommend we revise our handbook to kind of that's not really a requirement that they do that. And then the last thing was, let's see. Oh, some of the counties had requested whether the state could provide a website for them to post their information. Some counties have their own, but not all counties. There's some that don't have that online presence at all. And if the state could provide them a place for posting their notices of upcoming meetings or their plan or any of the public information required, that, if somebody doing a searched on that county would pop up that information, then that would provide a service to them, and again, satisfying a lot of the public notice requirements, and actually I think being more effective in giving people public notice. Again, I don't know what's involved in that.
state of Indiana, maybe through IoT, you can get a website set up for free, because I've looked into that for EMA.
Oh, okay.
Because what the county did, they went to another service, and it's not as, the site isn't secure, and I have to pay if I want any changes. But the state of Indiana, I believe through IoT, will help you get that set up. And that's something that we looked at.
Okay.
Because your meetings, have to be recorded and posted for at least 90 days, access to the public. So that is a way, get that on there, or just to set that up. So.
Well, I had not had an opportunity to research whether that was an option available. Gentlemen.
Yeah, we have IoT, but.
There's a question.
Go ahead.
Real quick to what Stephanie said, I just, with all the change in the law for the 2 townships that manage our fire territories with IoT and manage both their websites, they do, it is 100% free. The state has a managed contract, and basically they look you up at the program, project manager, you give them the content, they build the website, publish the website, and say, here's yours to run.
And it's secure.
7 pages for free on there, so you can actually.
And the forms and.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe all we need to do then is just get that word out to all the LEPCs that's available.
It's the Office of Technology,
Yeah.
all government services that they have a local government service program. And that's one of the things that they offer as far as subdomain, and you can IN.gov subdomain.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's secure. That was my biggest thing.
All of the LPC meetings on the LPC logo, which is on our IDA LPC webpage. And I try to have that done every year. And I guess I'm wondering if we do, if legal says it's okay to do it online, I mean, is that gonna be good enough? I mean, would it be okay for it to just be on LPC logo page? Or the LPCs to list their meetings, I mean, would that meet the requirement?
Well, he already said it's not in the statute.
Yeah, all I gotta do is comply the open door law, which from what I understand, just
And that's
requires you to post a notice at the location 48 hours in advance that the meeting's being held. And there are no other statutory or regulatory requirements that I can
We
find.
follow that.
Yeah,
Indiana Code 1325-2-14, disclosures to general public. It does, not up to the meeting, but local rules and planning commission annually published in those newspapers stating that the emergency response plan, insurance safety data sheets, and inventory forms have been submitted under this section. Notice must state that followers notices may be so be issued and now that never the public can desire to review. Evidently, this is the inventory form or follow-up notice in a certification. So that is required under Indiana code.
So what was the citation on that again?
13-25-2-14.
Okay.
Oh, here it is.
We did a website and that would cover it though, right? That requirement.
you probably need to check the open door law because I think there's also not an annual publication, but an annual notice to the media of what you're. So, I mean, it wouldn't require that paying for a legal notice. It would just require you to access it to media.
Well, I thank you, Jeff, for pointing, because I missed that. I think there is a bill that passed that, and I don't know if it's a revision of the open door law or what, I ran across that starting July 1st of 2027, I think it allows, is basically the bill that shifts everything from print publication to electronic publication. And we need to, that probably needs to be looked, I don't know how that might affect this specific requirement or if it could be applied to this as well.
I'm sure it's something Jasmine or Sean.
Yeah, that's,
mission.
And that was a bill that just passed this last year, I think. And I ran across that when I was researching this, but I was unaware that the statutes had such specific language for
It
publication.
doesn't come to meetings at all. I mean, that's a different, and this is derived out of that. Again, the whole idea was to allow transparency, allow public, Joe citizen to come in, find out what Lily's has, look at their submission, look at the county's emergency response plan. And then all of the yearly reminder that if a Joe citizen or Sally citizen want to come and see that information, that's not going to do it.
Right. So really a notice of availability as opposed to a requirement that you provide notice of all your meetings that far in advance.
This was separate than what has derived over the years about how it that includes both the ethical requirements and the meeting notice requirement that we tell people and all the meetings we're going to be anyway.
So you think that goes back to a federal requirement then? That,
The state basically. Documents any
right.
It's just. It wasn't less stringent, and it wasn't more stringent.
Well, it goes into more detail in some areas certainly, but
Of the federal.
the state went into more details than what was in the federal. Well, that obviously needs some more research then, because if that's and I guess what I would encourage is to looking at this 2027, July 1st, 2027 notice or bill, it goes into effect then, this past this year relative to, but essentially from what I could read, replaced the need for all state and local notices from being published to being allowed to be done online for notification purposes. So that needs to be looked at, I guess, particularly in relation to this other statutory requirement, and see if it overrides that or modifies that. But this is another good example where the state statute probably needs to be revisited and updated as well. So those were the four primary items I ran across and in discussing with staff, and Myra had her emergency responders who attend a lot of the LAPC meetings kind of solicit from them input on what could be done to help make things easier for them to comply. And through those processes, I can identify these four items for consideration. So I guess what I would recommend is we have the attorneys review each of these and see which ones we, would be allowed to go ahead and implement and change, and which ones we may not have any flexibility or may be affected by some other bill that's been passed.
Anything else? Anybody need to take a 5-minute break? We've been going for a while. If not, we'll keep trucking along. Everybody good? You need a break?
Can step out for a 5-minute break.
Yeah. Let's take 5 minutes. We'll come back and reconvene.
Everybody went for the 5-minute break, so I will be muting ourselves.
Get going.
Thanks again. I just, like I said, retired from the Marion County Health Department. I've been there for 43 years. I was on the LEPC for about 35 and on the IRC for the last 10. And so one of the things that I have talked about and I've seen over my career is the tier 2 reported fees. And as you've talked a lot this morning about, funding and maintaining funding and providing resources to first responders and also to the community. I mean, we're also about messaging the public what to do if there is a hazardous materials emergency. So I heard there was some discussion a little bit about the funding, and I don't know what they really talked about, but in the code, there is a formula that explains or that is used to calculate how much money an LEPC gets each year. So each LEPC that you just voted on will get a base amount of $2,500. That's not changed since EPRA was passed back many, many, many years ago. And then that money, that amount that we talked about in terms of the total, gets divided by the number of facilities that report. That turns into your quotient. And then what counties do is they multiply how many facilities they have reporting for that year times that amount, and that's added to the $2,500. So that's what an LEPC gets each year, funding. And so this is, okay, I'll go back. So this is what EPRA requires of facilities. We'll talk about a tier 2 report. So if you've got more than 10,000 pounds of a chemical that has a safety data sheet, you're required to report it. If you have above the threshold planning quantity for an extremely hazardous substance, you're required to report it. You're required to report that to the LEPC on March 1st of every year. That's the tier 2 report. Those reports, those tier 2 reports, go to the CERC, go to the LEPC, go to the jurisdictional fire department. Years ago, it was all paper mail going to the CERC and LEPCs and fire departments. Since HazConnect came around, they're done online, electronically, and then the fire department and the LEPCs all have access to HazConnect. So we can see in real time when a facility reports their tier 2. HazConnect also has a connection somehow to being able to do billing and invoicing. That was a huge deal back when we started looking at HazConnect, was collecting the money. The state of Indiana, many, many years ago, collected the money internally through an IDEM system, and it ended up costing the companies more to write the check than the check was often written for because of the process. And so this was a huge win for both LEPCs, CERC, and the facilities when we were able to go to an electronic system for invoicing and capturing the money. So again, like in Marion County, we have usually between 650 and 700 facilities reporting to us. So that's kind of our quotient. A little high, maybe.
I think it might be a little low.
A little low, okay. But that's what we would multiply towards that whatever that quotient is. Like if the total amount was $1,000 and there were 100 facilities, every facility would get $10, or that would be $10 times whatever. So the bottom line is the amount that we've collected has not increased. And we're going to talk a little bit about what the fees are in Indiana and see how those compare to other states in the region. So the fees exist. I mean, every state has an EPRA or has EPRA, has a CERC of some kind, but every state does things a little differently. Each has a different invoicing system. Some states don't charge. Some states charge much more. And they use the funding for different things. In Indiana, typically LEPCs use the money for funding hazmat response. You've heard Steve talk about, sensors and boots and suits and PPE, supporting LEPC planning. We write the LEPC plan. It's based on, volunteers putting stuff together. Also part of that LEPC planning and kind of going in with exercises, we exercise our plans every year to make sure that the plans are current. We don't need to make changes. We support training. The maintaining the chemical inventory systems probably isn't as big now for LEPCs as they were in the past, because we've got HAZConnect taking care of all that. But before, you know, the Marion County LEPC would get 750 pieces of paper, and we didn't want to, you know, have all these tier 2 paper files. So EPA did have a product called tier 2 submit. And so we would typically contract with somebody who would turn those paper files into tier 2 submit. And like Steve was saying, we put those on a CD and we'd send them around to all the jurisdictional fire departments in Marion County, but there was a cost to that. So now with HAZConnect, we don't have that. Again, training is huge. As Russ pointed out, hazmat is expensive, and so is the training that goes with it. The technology, the monitors, the meters, incident command, working in incident, because this is different than a fire, it's different than an earthquake. I mean, granted, they sometimes have hazmat connections, but with the hazardous materials, you know, you're now doing plume modeling, maybe, where you're trying to anticipate where it's going to go. If we have a derailment through downtown Indianapolis, going past Lucas Oil Stadium, you know, which way is the wind going to blow? You know, do we have to worry about the Indiana Government Center? You know, it's blowing to the north. So those kinds of things, we're constantly doing training, and unfortunately the training is getting expensive. And the fire department, you know, their work model is there are 3 shifts. So we can't train 1 shift. We have to train 3 shifts if we want to get the message across. So anything that we do in our county, we did 3 times. So that $5,000 training class now becomes $15,000 if we want to make sure that we get all of our first responders. And then maintaining the state databases, as Bruce pointed out, some of that 10% that gets collected off of the EPRA money is used to sustain HAZConnect. Next slide. So this is our example. So back in 2023, well, I'll go back. So I've been around a long, long time, and the people who are around me also kept great notes. In 1991, the Marion County LEPC had 580 facilities, and we received $24,998.20. That was what we got. In 2023, we had maybe 700 facilities would say, we got $36,796. 2024, it went up to 40,000. I haven't, since I've retired, I'm not connected with getting the audit reports from the city of Indianapolis. Our money goes to the city, and then the LEPC, we spend against that. And then 2026, I don't know. But our revenues have not increased significantly since, well, 2009, when we were getting about $37,000. How we spend our money. So in 2023, we spent about $17,500 on PPE, decon response equipment. We bought suits, boots, gloves, things that expire, things that wear out without even an incident. We did spend $20,000 on training. Now, we were very fortunate in 2023, HMEP money, the companies that transport hazardous materials on the road pay DOT a fine. And that money comes back to the state and then is offered through grants, the Hazardous Materials Emergency Planning Fund. So we were able to get $62,000. That was great. It funded 2 hazmat technician classes. So we're in District 5, as Russell pointed out. Any of the trainings that we do in Marion County, we offer to the entire district. So these D5, these hazmat tech classes, these are for the new firefighters that haven't received hazardous materials technician training required by OSHA, NFPA class. We didn't, in 2023, there are great conferences. The International Association of Fire Chiefs, Midwest Hazmat, Indiana Alliance of Hazardous Materials Responders put on great conferences. So we were also fortunate, we got $13,400 to send some of our hazmat coordinators. These are the guys that lead the teams. These aren't the teams themselves, but the hazmat coordinator is usually the battalion. The folks that are going to be running typically incident command or had advanced knowledge with hazardous materials techniques. 2024, we spent about $8,000 between calibration supplies and equipment. We did not get any HMEP money that year. So $39,000 of our budget went to the training, the tech classes, the classes for chemical detection, And then we also did not get any money for conferences, so we spent about $9,300. 2025, we spent about $23,000, as Russell pointed out. We have 2 fire departments with hazmat teams. We have 3 level A entry teams. Wayne has 1, IFD has 2. IFD also has 2 decon teams. IFD's 2 decon teams are probably Johnson County has a decon team. I'm guessing Hamilton County has a decon team. But outside of that, I don't know that how many departments have dedicated decon teams.
Yeah, there's not much outside of that. That's one of the things we're trying to push for.
So for 2026, what we did was we budgeted, again, because of our money's not keeping track, we've had to tighten the belt. And one of the tightenings that we did was, typically we would have given the fire departments a little bit more money, but for 2026, we budgeted $15,000. $2,500 for IFD's 2 entry teams, $2,500 each for their decon teams, $2,500 for Wayne Township's entry team, and the health department. We maintain a hazmat team. Now, we don't have as many folks as what they do, so we are a gap filler. We basically respond with Wayne and IFD on their runs, and so we support. We're a force multiplier, especially when it comes with advanced monitoring. You heard Steve talk about a multi-gas meter. So we have multi-gas meters, but we typically have more exotic sensors. It's very rare for our fire department to have a sensor, ammonia, for instance, or sulfur dioxide. And so with all these cold storage facilities going up that use anhydrous ammonia as a refrigerant, they all have anhydrous ammonia. We have facilities that have between 60 and 100,000 pounds of anhydrous ammonia in the refrigeration systems. So training, we did get really lucky. We got 16.5 this year for a 3-day training. No HMEP money for conferences. So again, we got $9,500 coming in our budget. So again, we're tightening our belt, but the thing is, there comes a point where we can't tighten it any further. And so this is where we've talked a lot about, we need to look at the funding. And it's probably been maybe mentioned here, some of the smaller LEPCs, if they're not getting any more funding than they did 40 years ago, is it really incentive for them to even operate, or what can they do with them? Next slide. So what I did is I went to Copilot and I said, hey, give me a Midwest Tier 2 cost burden ranking model based on fee structures in the Midwest states, normalized for 2 facility sizes. Scenario A, which is a 50 chemical facility, mid-size industrial. Scenario B is a 200 chemical facility, large industrial site. Next slide. So we'll go with the scenario B first, which is the 200. So this is a facility like a Lily's, large site, 200 chemicals. What are other states charging? So in Pennsylvania, they have a unique system. The state charges $10 per chemical that is reported. That goes to the state. But what Pennsylvania allows is LEPCs now get in the game. They start billing. And LEPC fees range from $50 to $75 per chemical. And they also can have emergency planning surcharges. So that way, that's how Pennsylvania, that's how their hazmat teams are well funded, is by, they do their own. The state gets some money, but the LEPCs. There is a downside, Lily's. Their fees generally are between $2,000 and $15,000 annually, depending on the county. I looked up Philadelphia, the city of Philadelphia. And, their fees are 75, and they have some pretty significant surcharges on their plans. When you submit a plan to the Philadelphia LEPC, they're really going through it and making sure that the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. So next down is Missouri. They're a hybrid system. They have per substance and a threshold-based structure. They do multiply facility complexity fees. They didn't go into a lot of detail what that is, but you're looking at between $800 and $2,500 plus for facilities in Missouri. That's all. Wisconsin, they just went to a new system. There's on the scaling. So our 200 chemical facility in our example, its number band fee of about $1,200 plus its state fee. Typically in Wisconsin, depending on the size of your, on the number of chemicals and how many pounds, you're somewhere between the $1,000 and $2,000 range. Ohio, again, they have a base fee plus a $20 per chemical, plus an EHS surcharge. Typically in Ohio, a facility like on our example will pay anywhere from $1,500 to $2,500. Kentucky has a facility-based tier system. Not, again, not a true per chemical. They do use Has Connect. They have much more significant late fees though. I think ours is $20 a month.
Yep.
Theirs
And I
is-
have to manually fix them.
Yep.
Every month.
Theirs is $250 right off the bat. $250 if you're late. Their typical, depending on the facility classification, this facility would pay somewhere between $200 and $1,000, depending on certain circumstances. Next slide. Michigan, again, inventory-based EPRA, some facility scaling. Typically, they're somewhere between $300 and $1,200 for our 200 chemical facility. Indiana, now this is us. So we charge $50, $100, and $200, and it's depending on how many chemicals. If you have more than 1 million chemicals, or 1 million pounds, right? 1 million pounds of chemicals you're reporting, you'll pay $200. If you have less than 1 million pounds, you'll pay $100. And if you've got an underground storage tank like gasoline stations, you pay $50. And so the maximum that any facility would pay, in our example, would be $200. Illinois has a state-controlled EPRA system, no chemical scaling, and typically theirs is around 100 to 500, so they're kind of similar to us. Next slide. So looking at our scenario A with our 50 chemical facility, mid-size, Pennsylvania, you're looking $500 to $3,000, Missouri, $500 to $1,200, Wisconsin, $825 to $990, Ohio, $700 to $1,500, Kentucky, $150 to $600, Michigan, $150 to $500, Indiana, typically $100 to $200, and probably more in the $100 range. Because if you're, if you're a mid-size, you may not have more than 1 million pounds. And then Illinois is somewhere around 100 to 300. Next slide. So I was going to do a deeper dive into the Wisconsin hybrid because I really like what they're doing. And I think and we talked here about, well, let's just double them. Instead of 50, 100, 200, let's make it 100, 200, 400. Well, that's one way of looking at it. But another is, let's look at maybe with chemical and the size of how many chemicals they got and how much they have. Maybe that's a more practical use in terms of trying to get at what is the risk to the community? What is the risk to the first responders? What do they need in order to do what they want to do? So Wisconsin's program is not per chemical like North Carolina. North Carolina has some of the highest tier 2 fees. It's not flat fee like us, and it's not county driven like Pennsylvania. What it is, it's scaled facility inventory fee system with quality weighting, quantity weighting. So what that means is, next slide. So here's what Wisconsin does. So you have a chemical count bucket. How many chemicals does your facility have? And then you have an total on-site quantity threshold. How much do you have? And then with each bracket, lower rate of total hazardous chemical inventory is less than 100,000 pounds. It's higher if you have more than 100,000 pounds. So here's the table. So if you only report one chemical, your Marathon, and you report gasoline, one chemical, but you got 10 gazillion pounds of it up there, you would pay $330. If you had one chemical and you're less than 100,000 pounds, you'd pay $275. 2 to 10, 11 to 100, 101 to 200. I guess in Wisconsin, nobody has more than 200 chemicals, but so in our examples, a small facility, like with 3 chemicals, less than 100,000 pounds, they'd pay $550 a year. A medium facility, 25, less than 100,000 pounds, would pay $990. On a large facility, 150 chemicals, over 100,000 pounds, would pay $1,200. I'm not, these numbers, these are Wisconsin numbers, but the concept is what I'm saying is, if we looking at not only, how much, but how many chemicals, is that a make sense kind of strategy in terms of if we are going to open things back up and talk about the fees, along with some of these other things that have been mentioned this morning about, things to make it easier for the LEPCs. And then last, I'll leave you with so this is Pennsylvania. This is the Lucerne County LEPC's website. And so down here at the bottom, it talks about other ordinances. So in Pennsylvania, the LEPCs are allowed to adopt ordinances that they can then charge fees. I don't know, I've not read anything in any of Indiana code that says LEPCs can't do that. We are now county boards. We weren't always county boards. We were independent county agencies. We were at one time a more direct report part of the IRC, but for stories that will fill this whole day, we're not anymore. But what that means is, could LEPCs say, you know, we need extra money. So why couldn't we pass an ordinance requiring facilities to pay chemical and off-site emergency response planning fees? Like I say, in Pennsylvania, their fees range from, you know, like 75 to 100 per chemical, and then $100 per off-site emergency response plan. And, you know, they get notified through, it's basically the reporting period runs January 1st to March 1st, just like tier 2 reporting. And the way I read this is the state of Pennsylvania will send the LEPC, this is like what, you know, we could see from HasConnect, who they are and what they've got, and then the LEPC bills. And that's how a lot of the LEPCs fund their, especially their regional response teams. Anyway, so that is a real short discussion about tier 2 fees. You can kind of see what's going on around the Midwest. You can see where we are, and hopefully you can see where, you know, we're struggling. I mean, LEPCs are very frugal. Ours is very frugal, and we have, over the course of years, saved up some money. You know, the rainy day fund. And if Steve were here, because we always talk about the rainy day fund, I would tell Steve that it's starting to rain. It's not a storm, but it's starting to rain, and we are starting to, in order to provide the training, provide the resources. IFD is a huge department, but they've got tactical trucks, they got personnel costs, they got all these other costs. And so when the hazmat coordinator tries to get his in there and saying, hey, I need $700 for a sensor or for a calibration gas, or you know, we've already, you know, we budgeted money. We've already had at our April meeting, Wayne Township came to us and said, you know, some of our sensors are about 5 years old and they're on their last leg. We don't know when they're going to die, but they're going to die soon. So we need sensors. And so the LEPC, you know, Amy's there, other companies, they're like, yeah. And again, I wanted to kind of mention this maybe at the beginning. I think there's a misconception about, I mean, facilities are partners in this. I mean, I haven't heard a lot about facilities, but we need to get these guys really engaged back in this organization. There's a lot of facilities out there that think they're going to call 911. They're going to get a hazmat team fully capable, fully able to respond in 15 to 20 minutes. And that happens in certain areas, and in other areas, it doesn't. I can even tell you in Indianapolis, it doesn't happen. Steve Jones used to work for Pike Township Fire Department. One morning, the chief said, we're not doing hazmat anymore. It's just too expensive. Dow AgroSciences, Marathon, a couple other large facilities up in Pike Township. What are we going to do? You know, we're now relying on Wayne Township and IFD, which is, you know, 15, 20, you know, 30 minutes away for our response if we have an incident in our labs. So again, you know, all these facilities that go in and are building these plants and not bothering to maybe do a little due diligence and say, you know, if we have a hazmat incident, how long is it going to take to get now, like Steve said, you know, you're going to call 911, you're going to get a truck and 4 guys. But, you know, it may be like the commercial. You remember the commercial where, you know, it was like the difference between a security, I forget the terms, like the guy who watches security and the actual security officer. And, you know, the guy robs the bank. Yeah, security monitor. Yes, he's robbing the bank. I see that. Well, aren't you going to do something? No, I'm a monitor. Well, that's what those are. I mean, they are not trained. I mean, it's very specific. You know, Steve mentioned it, whether you do offensive or defensive actions. Defensive action is a different game. Offensive, putting somebody in a suit, going down range to rescue somebody or to close a valve or do something. That's a different game, and it takes a different kind of skill set, training, equipment. And so like I say, a lot of, I think even in my county, and we try to stress this, that You know, yes, you pay your taxes, and yes, they are high. And you get a lot for that money. But hazmat is kind of like Swiftwater Rescue, High Rope Rescue. I mean, it's an add-on. And fire departments. When I became the hazmat coordinator for Marion County in 1999, Washington Township had a team, Warren had a team, Perry had a team, Wayne had a team, Pike had a team, Lawrence had teams. Now we're down to Wayne and IFD. And there's talk about consolidation all the time between IFD and Wayne. And, you know, if you're a fire chief and you're like, hey, I'm faced with struggles too, do I need 3 hazmat? And so it's a lot. I like your, being here. I love serving on this group. Great conversations. I wish you all the best in solving this. I mean, I think it is possible, but again, one thing I think I would not lose sight on is getting facilities. I mean, when we had our last LEPC meeting and another company whose person is not here, when she heard that there was a fire department that would be responding to her facility if there was an incident, was basically kind of begging for money to buy a center. Or the largest fire department in the state of Indiana saying, we don't have enough money for we're going to be out. We have one incident and we're done. And so, again, I'll show you.
Do you know what your total budget? Not sure how to phrase this, but I'm trying to get a sense of, you get approximately 40,000 a year from LEPC. What percentage of that is a total for what's needed or what's actually budgeted or spent?
So we're like I said, we've leaned out, and so our budget this year was like $44,000, and we budgeted, and that's for.
But that's from the LEPC.
Yes.
I mean, for what you're providing, the budget for that total cost of all those services, and I know it's beyond what the LEPC spends. It's whatever.
Right. Well, what we're doing now is, so if we're getting 37 to 40, we understand the long range. And so if we continue to spend, like the year when we spent $39,000 on training, I mean, we blew our budget. I mean, we brought in 37 or 40,000, and we probably spent close to 80.
I'm not saying, I'm trying to get a sense of the total cost, not just for the LEPC, but for all those services provided. I mean, the LEPC is only providing a small piece.
Oh, definitely.
Of that.
I couldn't, you mean what IFDs?
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you. I mean, if you could get somebody from IFD or Wayne to come in, but talking about hazmat physicals.
Or just personnel costs.
Personnel costs.
Yeah.
Yes.
I believe this gentleman can add.
Yes, sir.
I'm the new hazmat coordinator.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
We're in the process of reviewing all that right now. We talked on the phone. We're looking at what possibilities we're gonna have with DECOM. I'm currently meeting with outside agencies. I can tell you I've met with some departments in Morgan County that have said, oh, by the way, we don't do hazmat. So if we have a hazmat run, we're calling IFD. I'm an hour away. I just did a tabletop in Lafayette last week. They ended up putting me and my boss into play on that tabletop. And I said, would you guys really be calling us? Absolutely. So we're talking about IFD responding to the city of Lafayette. So as we talk about hazmat, it's a big picture, it's a big cost. If you include, I've got roughly 250 technicians. I have 2 entry teams plus their tax, their trucks. I have 2 decon teams plus their trucks. We were fortunate enough to be able to fund 2 new entry trucks. Those trucks are $1.3 million each. Our new decon trucks are going to be about $250,000 each. We're talking millions of dollars a year just in hazmat. That's not what my hazmat budget is, but if you can include the apparatus, staffing, training. We were fortunate enough, I came from training. Last year, the hazmat test class that LEPC paid for in the past, we've moved to doing that in-house. We have enough instructors and people that can do that, that we moved that class in-house. Hopefully next year, I think we're gonna open that up to everybody in the county. So we're all looking at different ways. We know budgets are gonna be cut with new funding levels. So that gives you a very brief idea. If you want something that's really technical, you may have to put that together. But a lot of this, I've only been thinking for about 2 months, and it's an eye opener where we would have to travel. Something else with that, not only our hazmat teams aren't dedicated. So if Station 31's ladder is out on a working structure fire, that takes their decon response team out of SCOTUS, which takes us down to 1 team. Because of where the stations that do hazmat are, if we have a large structure fire downtown, it negates everything we have to respond to hazmat if Morgan County calls for the spill on I-69 and Henderson Boulevard. It's things to keep in perspective, even for IFD, when it comes to hazmat.
For the sake of time, I'll move on to public comment. Mr. Hendrick, I think you're on the list here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just add a couple of things to, give you a different perspective outside of IFDs. My name is Josh Hendrick. I'm Deputy Chief of East Madison Fire Territory of the Madison County, so Anderson. Up there, and I'll get into this another reason why I'm here, because it's an ag context, what you were saying. So up there, there's a Madison County hazmat team. So Madison County hazmat team was founded originally back in the 80s. Was founded by a mixture of a bunch of fire departments in the county, mostly volunteer departments. 4 or 5 years ago, there were 15 fire departments in the county, one of them being, 2 of them were three fully career. Now there's 9 fire departments in the county, and all but about 3 of them are career just because of consolidation. Well, you know what that hazmat is? Madison County hazmat team used to be the City of Anderson Fire Department, Richland Township Fire Department, Adams Township Fire Department, and some assistance from some others, just one-offs. That went away, as he was saying. Basically, Anderson came in, the largest department in the county, so no longer do hazmat, and you guys need, got a lot of pieces. Adams Township, if they do another fire territory, they no longer do hazmat, but my department does it. So our team's kind of unique, because everything is owned by the county, everything is funded by the county, besides the people. My paycheck comes from the fire territory. We have 10 on staff all day long, plus myself and a couple other chiefs that are Monday through Friday. But the point of that is, when you look at the budgets, our county hazmat team does about 30 to 40 calls a year. We used to do a lot more of the fuel spill side of it, but that's kind of got away because we trained ourselves out of business and said, we don't want to go all the way to the other end of the county and put down a couple bags of oil drive. We can't do that anymore. Funding wise, we handle larger spills and the big stuff. But when that comes in, we've had 0 budget until 2 years ago. And what I say by that is we've been 100% funded by LEPC, by HMEP grants, and by cost recovery. 2 years ago, when the Health First funds came out from the state, we actually ended up being merged. We used to be under EMA, and we became under the health department. Said, hey, we're going to give you $25,000 a year of this out of that bucket. You guys use it to administer your fire department or your hazmat team. It was the first time in 40 years of a hazmat team that we actually had a dedicated budget. We gave you that 1 year. As everybody knows, the political stuff changed. The Health First got cut down. The Healthy First Indiana stuff got cut down. They came to me in the year that I was promised in June and said, hey, I'll spend that money here. Said we're either taking it away or we're laying off additional persons. Now we have 1 year, $25,000 in existence that we've operated on a true budget. Where that gets into a problem is right now, we are very fortunate because we had it last week, we had a 1,300 gallon diesel spill into a creek from a gas station. Our hazmat team responded. The county's going to send a bill, replenish all their supplies, pays for the truck that we operate and everything else. My department ate the 11 people that were operating for 5 hours personnel costs. Well, as everybody knows, in the climate with costs, that won't go on much longer because they can't. So where I get with that, and it was really interesting listening to Jeff talking about some of those states before about those other states. I went under a project a couple of years ago, and if you guys were at the meeting at the Indiana Hazmat Conference last year, I talked a little bit about ERC meeting. I talked a little bit about that project that I reached out to a bunch of other states and looked into the way they do their hazmat. And he brought up Wisconsin's response to their structure. It's really interesting because if you know anything about Wisconsin, they have a very robust hazmat team. They have about 1 million population less than Indiana. They're geographically larger, but there's a lot of rural area up there. In the state of Indiana, there is zero, and Russ hit on it earlier, there's 0 type 1, and that's the highest level of hazmat teams in the state of Indiana, 0. Wisconsin has 2. Wisconsin also divides into 4 task forces, and they have multiple type 3 teams, multiple type 2 teams, and they have a very robust state system that if this is big enough, they'll send one of their teams, and then they'll pull in another team. I was talking to a gentleman from Milwaukee Fire, which is one of their hazmat guys. He runs their hazmat team. They're one of their type 1 teams, and he was asking me how hazmat's funded in the state of Indiana. I said 100% local. And I talked to the predecessor, Travis, about how they're funded, and I said, hey, this is how this funding works. He says, you mean you receive 0 state funding? I said, my LEPC gets about $6,500 a year that they give me. We get HMEPs maxed at $20,000 a year if we get them. So that's it. He laughed. He said, man, I'm gonna tell my guys to shut up. He said, we get $350,000 a year from the state of Wisconsin just solely for our hazardous materials program. That's equipment, that's whatever we need it for. He said, that's not what Milwaukee Fire Department budgets for hazmat. That is the state of Wisconsin writes them a check every year to fund their hazmat. So where I get with that, Pennsylvania is another one of those. Pennsylvania requires every county in the state to either 1, have a hazmat team, or 2, sign a contract with the neighboring county to cover that, or some can. They do the same thing. You saw their fees were higher. They funnel those fees. They certify their teams. They do a qualification process, which is a lot on IDHS. But they say, hey, these teams meet it, and if you don't meet it, we don't give you money. So there's a lot of systems out there, and I think, I support everything. And so, I run the fire department. I'm deputy chief. I run the county hazmat team. I'm also the chair of Madison County's LEPC. I'm also the secretary on the Indiana Alliance Hazardous Materials Responders. So when you talk about volunteer and what, everybody has the time, I greatly appreciate the conversation about decreasing the LPC stuff. The roster approvals is an absolute nightmare, because, and it's like, and I probably got a little bit toned to Melissa one time when I sent an email, are you kidding me? I'm going to do 20 some of these, and I've already had 3 changes this year. I got to change, and then get them back, then go in and submit them, and it is what it is. But anything we can do in that to make life easier, everybody appreciates. The tier 2 fees, I get Indiana is business friendly. I get we have to have that drive, that economic drive. But I have Nestle, I have cold storages, Eli Lilly, these other places, they want to know hazmat's coming. I've got my industry sit in my LEPC meeting and pay bills for me. Carter Express bought me tires for my hazmat trucks. We couldn't afford to do it. Prairie Farms writes a check every year for $1,200 to pay for our plume modeling that Jeff was talking about. Because they're all like, well, you guys can't fund it, but we have to have this. I'm more than happy to give money. Like Nestle's problem is Nestle can't do that. They're capped at $500 locally. That's all they can give me. They're like, if you can charge me fees, I'll pay the bill. I just can't give you more than $500. That's the way their corporate policies work. So most of the people we've talked to, Red Gold's in the same boat. They're like, hey, I'll give you stuff. I'll pay more fees. They don't care to do that. They just aren't going to do it unless they're told to do it, is part of the problem. Most of them it becomes, we can't get so crazy where it's 20 grand a year and businesses are like, I'm going to Kentucky or I'm going to, we can't do that. But we also can't have a state without hazmat response, and the IMDs of the world and these other teams that you saw. And Russ's numbers are good, but I can tell you there is a difference in what teams say as well. So I'm a hazmat team. One of those I know really well on there. I train that team. Their hazmat team consists of having a wheel drive and pickup truck. It's not a hazmat team. Yes, they can put down a wheel drive, but that's about as far as it gets. So I'm more than happy to discuss with anybody any more of this. I put a lot of research into it because I take a lot of credit in hazmat and trying to keep it going. And I always look at like the East Palestine development. Before I came back to the fire department, I worked for a hazmat contractor. I have a lot of friends that were in that project. Indiana's not ready for that. They're not. We would be, but because we're the fire service, and those of you in here, I promise we will make it work with IDEM and the state. And we'll make it work and it'll look really good. And that's part of the problem is because we all work and make it work. And then it's like, well, we probably shouldn't have because sometimes failure drives results. So, I look back 20 years ago when I had 20 years ago, Larry was there at state and bought us a hazmat truck. They gave us all the money. It was a district model. Stop. And, take care of it. So, it's just something to definitely think about. Last piece I want to talk about real quick. I mentioned the Indiana Hazmat Alliance. So I am the secretary, I also head up the training. In 2022, we entered into an agreement that the state and this commission to bring the Indiana Hazmat Conference to Central Indiana and put it at this facility. It's here every October. Part of that agreement, we're getting $10,000 from the state every year to help fund that. And my understanding, I don't know where all the buckets come from. My understanding, it was through this commission. Last year, about 2 months before the conference, we were told, no, sorry, can't do that. It drastically hurt the conference. We had to go from a $50 charge that we're only doing to get people to actually have to skin in the game and come to $200, and our enrollment decreased by 50%. Well, it's not good when you talk about team meeting training. We bring state level, we bring national level instructors. I go to Baltimore every year, the IAFC conference that Jeff was mentioning. There's teams from all over the world that come to that conference. We have the same instructors here. A lot of these places, I can send a guy here even at $200 what the charge now. I can send 10 people down here for $2,000. It costs me about $3,000 to send somebody to Baltimore. So bang for your buck, but the money that this commission gave went solely to instructors. Our vendors pay for the snacks, our vendors pay for the lunches. I'm just bringing it up that if that's something that's coming up in October again, if that's something we can consider funding again. And I know, Marshall, we've had some conversations, but